So, over to you, Liam, to start us off.
Kia ora tātou. Hope you can all hear me all right. So this is a traditional opening karakia to set the scene for a meeting. It evokes the atmosphere of the dawn, you know, of a brisk new day, and also the possibilities and opportunities that a new day can present. So we can draw on this karakia and embrace the opportunities that might come from this hui that we're about to begin. So, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te a tākura. He tio, he huka, he hauhu. Ti hei mauri ora.
Cheers. All right, so our first speaker today is Yotam Kay. Yotam is an organic vegetable gardener and educator. He lives in the Kauranga Valley with his partner Neva, and they make a living there from their regeneratively farmed market garden. Yotam, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Thomas. And yeah, it is a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to talk about how I can see a future for our regenerative food system. And I'm going to talk about the larger problems with our food system, challenges that small-scale farmers and farmers face in general, and some opportunities forward. I'm going to concentrate on stuff like policy. I think there's the sound is like a good forum for that. Can everyone hear me?
That's a bit better. You're up there a little bit.
Okay, I can speak. I can speak more loudly.
No, probably a little quieter, maybe even. Now it's too quiet.
Yotam's on mute now. You're muted.
Is this okay?
There we
go. Yes.
Okay. Fun things with Zoom. Okay, I'll get into it. So I'm going to speak about a lot of issues, and I'm going to touch on a lot of them really briefly. So if you have any questions, please write them down, and I'll answer them in the Q&A afterwards. And okay, so first of all, we have our food system is in a crisis, a really, really big one. Most of the way the food is grown, it is highly polluting. It is polluting our earth, it is polluting our water, it is polluting our air, it is exploiting labor, and this is happening here in New Zealand, everywhere in the world and in here. There is soil loss. The UN said already a couple of decades ago that about half of the world's usable topsoil has been washed to the rivers and into the sea. Farming is actually to our environment in its practices, it's using a lot of petroleum to produce the food that gets to the coast. And then there's also an issue with all the chemicals that is causing a very, very big devastation to insects, like the insect apocalypse. And basically kill everything, and then chemicals to feed their crops, and chemicals like herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides to actually grow the food. And the numbers of the amount of chemicals that used is just about the developments in the numbers of sprays that we're using, and it's only about 15 herbicides per season, 15 fungicides per season, and 15 pesticides. So herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, about 15 of each, and that is just for growers' plants. Our supply food chains are not working well. Most of our food is not grown within our local communities. And other hidden costs is that because our food is so full of chemicals and is of low nutritional value, then the people who are eating lettuce and thinking that that is a nutritional food, actually chemically grown or hydroponically grown lettuce is very lack of nutrients. And with the chemical load, enough medication goes chemically grown food. And so moving to nutritional, more nutritional, organic, regenerative food production will affect our health system quite a lot. We have an issue that food prices don't really reflect the true cost of food production. What's happening is that because since World War II, with the amount of chemicals and available petroleum that came into the market, the food is the food costs are actually externalized by all this environmental damage and by not paying the earth for all of the oil that's being used. I learned about environmental issues, started environmental studies in 2006, and studied about agriculture and horticulture, and decided I'm going to make a career in finding solutions to these really big problems. And I think there's mainly 3 ways to go forward with making radical change to our food system. And the first one is on you, is to grow your own food. Don't put that responsibility on somebody else. In Russia, for example, 50% of the fresh produce is grown in backyard, and that is huge. And that had been the trend about a century ago everywhere in the world. So aim to grow more of your own food. There's no reason why not to. Vegetables like to grow, so with a little bit love and care, you can grow food for all of your family. So I'm not talking about 2 or 4 square meters. I would like to see people aspire to 20 square meter gardens and 50 square meter gardens and 100 square meter gardens. So 100 square meter garden for a mediumly skilled gardener is about 6 hours of work a week. And you can put it in pulses. You can do it every day a little bit or a little bit on the weekend. So that's the first thing I want to suggest. The second is that there will be more small scale farms like thousands. And it doesn't have to be outdoor. There's lots of variations to be from quarter acres to acres. It can be small, diverse to become really healthy for our environment. You can't just grow a monoculture and to have a healthy food production system. And then we need to help big, large corporations convert from their current chemical way of doing things to organics. So we need to help them out. And being a farmer is difficult for farmers and professional farmers. So it shouldn't just be on the farmers. It should be much harder and much bigger. And it also affects still on everyone else for organic food, because everybody is struggling financially because not everybody, but many people are, because the whole system. I think to fix the food issue is relatable to all of our other issues in terms of our economic system. So if you can buy more produce, in terms of policy that I'm going to delve into, we need to make sure that everybody who uses chemicals and that pollutes the earth and pollutes the water actually gets them. So most of the reason we have so much is because of big business that are wanting to make very, very highest margins they can, and so they use toxins really liberally. And so we need to regulate that a lot more. And then hand in hand, we have to help farmers move out of these polluting practices into regenerative practices. I listen to a lot of farming podcasts, regenerative farming, all the different types of crops there are on many large hectare, like 30 and 50 and 100 acres of regenerative productions. The solutions are there for every type of crop out there, and we need to see the industry moving to that direction, and converting from one way to another is really difficult. So we need to actively help farmers convert. And so we need to increase chemical herbicides, fungicides, and pesticides. More of these products should be banned. We need to ban hormones in the meat industry. And when things are banned, or when new legislation is being offered, it's really important to make sure that it actually helps small scale farmers. For example, the organic bill that has been proposed is at its current version is destructive for the small organic farmer and for the organic movement. It's not just going to serve purpose; it's going to shoot the regenerative food production system community in the foot. So we hope that the select committee is going to hear farmers and the people who has raised their voice, and we're going to speak to the committee. So supporting small-scale farmers. There are countries like France and like Canada. If a farmer brings out a business and they $50,000 or euros to help them start their farm. And if they stay in business for 5 years, they don't need to pay that back. Starting a farming business is really difficult. So helping farmers in that way, at the moment, to be a farmer, you need to be good. And we need stuff like farming to be good. Yes.
Can I interrupt you? Sorry, your connection is really quite interrupted. So we're losing almost half of what you're saying, which is a real pity.
Oh no. I go closer. I'll move closer to my Wi-Fi spot, but usually we have great connection. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, it's good.
Okay.
That's much better, yep.
Awesome. So it was so what I was saying in my last point is that we need to help farmers start up. To start as a farmer is really difficult, and we need to help small farmers. So there are grants that countries like Canada and France offer to beginning farmers, and so that is an easy solution that has been working in other places. And the farming trade is also underappreciated. There is, although it's such a key, if everybody eats food, it's very skilled work. It takes years to master. There's a lot of education at the moment about regenerative farming practices. And farmers worldwide and in New Zealand suffer a lot of depression and suicide. Actually, the suicide rates for farmers every world
Sorry.
Yes?
Yeah, we're losing all that, my friend.
Oh no! I'll go even closer.
How much presentation have you got to go?
I've got the last kind of 10%.
Okay.
But I can speak slower, but I'm very, very close to my Wi-Fi, and there's not much I can do about it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
It's just intermittent. It breaks up intermittently.
Okay. I'll speak slow.
Good.
I'm very excited, and I'm very passionate about this. So I'll try and keep that enthusiasm and speak slower.
Good.
So the system is broken at the moment for farmers, for the consumers, and the earth. And there are ways forward. We need to ensure that there is government-led systematic change, and that systematic change will help farmers that practice regenerative farming, that they will be supported, and that they won't be punished by pricing the produce. Okay, I was speaking slow.
Yep, it's not your speaking, it's the connection.
I've got such good connection. I mean, I can move to another computer, but I've pretty much finished.
Good. Well, maybe you could.
I'll give you another. I'll say another minute and see if that can go.
Okay, go on.
And we need to make sure that farmers are not stuck at their current conventional way of doing things that cause environmental harm. And we need to make sure that consumers have a living wage, that they can buy produce, that everybody can afford organic produce. We can make this change, help fight climate change, and improve the well-being of our communities and the environment. During COVID-19, farms like ours fed thousands of households and adapted really quickly to the current situation. Small-scale farms offer the most amount of resilience and should be encouraged in any way possible.
Cool.
And I'll stop with that.
Thank you very much. Now, we'll move to the next speaker, but maybe you could try another computer in the meantime to come back to Q&A. Cool.
Yep.
Thanks, Joachim. Brilliant.
So, thank you.
Our next speaker is Joanna Mannington. Jo is qualified food nutritionist, traveller, educator and catering business owner. She's been a teacher at Mercury Bay Area School for the last 5 years, Jo?
Yeah, part-time for the last 4 years and full-time this year.
Okay, you're on.
Thanks. I'm really pleased that Yotam spoke about resiliency and farmers and government-led systematic change, because actually that's what I was going to talk about as well. I know my heading is about healthy food, but I think that this audience all know about healthy food. Even my students, you know, from middle years to senior years, have a pretty good understanding of nutrition, and they all know how to eat real food, not too much, mainly plants. But as one kid told me, you know, we know pies are not healthy, we know why, but they're so yum. So yeah, I'm not going to talk about how to eat healthier. I think you guys all know that. I think I was going to talk a little bit more broadly about our food system. So I'm so pleased that Yotam said that. And I know that's kind of ambitious for 10 or 12 minutes talk. So I'm going to start with a quote from James Cameron, who is a filmmaker of the likes of Titanic and Avatar. He's also the owner of multiple small-scale... Are you guys still there? Gonna move. Okay, hold on. Technology, eh? Yeah, so I'll start that again. Yeah, so James Cameron is a filmmaker of the likes of Titanic and Avatar, and he owns multiple small-scale organic farms in the Wairarapa. And I'll return to this a little bit later. And he says, reconsidering how we eat offers us hope, empowering us with choice over what our future planet will look like. We're currently at level 2 of lockdown, and our part of the world is nice and safe and settled, and we have a perfect team of 5 million ready and able to move quickly together to make a change or make changes. I kind of feel that we're on a frontier of a new normal, and we have this opportunity to reconsider and make some choices and change the way we operate our food system, the food system that Yotam was talking about. It's a really good time to leverage off lockdown and the virus, and quickly before we settle back into our old habits. This was like the first time that most Kiwis have experienced food insecurity since World War II, and it really scared a lot of people, and we could see that manifest itself in panic shopping. And I think, yeah, we need to leverage off this to make sure it doesn't happen to us again, and we need to start thinking and planning and acting nationally. As Yotam said, we need, what did he say? Government-led systematic change. Now, Lorraine Jacobs, I don't know if anyone's familiar with her, but she's a food influencer, largely on the hospitality scene. But currently, she's suggesting that it's a perfect time for a Ministry of Food. She was on RNZ a couple of weeks ago, spruiking this idea. And she wants to bring together our fractured food, system and formulate a national food strategy that addresses all aspects of the system. She says that we're not going to achieve our goal of a national food strategy unless we get Tourism New Zealand, Ministry of Primary Industries, Ministry of Business, Innovation, Enterprise, Beef and Lamb, farmers, and all the other food people on side. And she's promoting the idea of a combined effort between government departments and agencies, which is basically what Yotam was saying. Wellington and Dunedin already have a dedicated community food resilience officer within their council. And these people work on strengthening the local food systems, everything from growing, production, manufacture, through to distribution systems, consumption and waste. So maybe this is something that we could do in our area of the world. If Wellington and Dunedin can do it, why can't Whitianga do it, or the Coromandel do it? And all of those all lead on to this, government-led systematic change. I don't want to repeat what Yotam said, so I might just skip this little bit. But the council, the Wellington and Dunedin council system, council resilience food officer, they look at a community food system, which includes equity, sustainability, self-reliance, empowerment, and personal and communal wellness, which is where Yotam was talking about looking locally as well as nationally. The Dunedin and Wellington groups have found that most local communities don't grow enough of their own fruit and vegetables, and particularly in Auckland, where they're building over a lot of the arable land. So they're looking at ways to increase that. So this officer's this position is about pulling all the bits and pieces together and getting information out to the public. Just getting back to Lorraine Jacobs' Ministry of Food idea, we've shown that we're a land of innovators and adapters, and a let's do this mentality. As I previously said, we've got a team of 5 million to mobilise a national food strategy to become self-sufficient. There's no reason why New Zealand can't be completely self-sufficient. We can grow bananas and coffee in Northland. We can grow everything that we need. And then we can look to selling naturally raised, grass-fed, hormone and antibiotic-free, pesticide and fertilizer-free happy protein, whether that's vegetable or animal, that commands a higher export premium, leveraging off our safe image, which is also greener and cleaner than most of the rest of the world. My friend Susan Wilson and I have been talking about New Zealand as a 21st century arc, and we can see that acknowledged by people like James Cameron, people like Bill Gates, who are looking, and Peter Thiel, who are looking at New Zealand as a safe place to set up their organic farms and their businesses. So we need to be really mindful that we don't sell it off, and that we manage it well. We don't sell it off to Aucklanders to build their houses on our arable land. We don't sell it off to big conglomerates like Synlait. We don't lose control of it, and I think that New Zealanders are a bit complacent about that. Okay, so I've deliberately used another party's slogan because Greens can't achieve this alone, and we need to work in with another team or other teams, and our role as educators and watchdogs. Like Yotam was saying, we need to help farmers, not alienate farmers. And on the Coromandel, we have a lot of dairy farmers. We have a lot of dairy farmers that own holiday homes. And maybe we should consider working together to promote this idea of Lorraine's about a food ministry, to work collaboratively on all aspects of improving our national food system. Last Saturday, I had some friends over for dinner, and they are big syndicate farmers. National voting people. They own big farms in the North Island and the South Island, and even one in the States. And we discussed the environmental and humanitarian problems agriculture and food systems pose. And I have to say, I was really thrilled to hear that they talked about 3 points that I just read about in the New Zealand National Geographic on an article about the future of food. They said that, we've got a lot of mouths to feed and we need to lift productivity, but we also need to lighten the footprint on the environment. They talked about reducing waste, and they also, interestingly enough, talked about a just people need to adjust their expectations of what they need to eat. The meal that we were eating was largely vegetarian, so almost vegan. So that was interesting as well. And at the end of our conversation, I said that I was doing this talk today, and is there anything that they'd like me to communicate to this green audience? And they said pretty much what Yotam said, that conversations between all stakeholders are really important, and that farmers are farmers because they love the land, but they need help, and that we all need to work together. So I'm wondering if we could use this Ministry of Food platform perhaps to increase green influence on our 21st century arc of New Zealand. In our particular location, we've relied heavily on tourism, putting all our eggs in that tourism basket, which we all know is unsustainable and has proved unsustainable with recent events. Maybe we need to go back to what we're best at, which is growing food. The world might not need to travel, but they do need to eat, and we need to be secure in that. So that's all I want to say on this. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Thanks so much, Joanna. I love the idea of New Zealand self-sufficient in food in the 20th century arc, and a Ministry of Food. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
Okay, so on to Liam and Hannah. Hannah and Liam are the two no waste nomads behind the rubbish trip. Since July 2017, they've been travelling New Zealand full time, giving free talks and presentations about how individuals can reduce their household waste. And their presentation, and which we're going to see today, is based on their own research and experience, and it comes out of having lived without a rubbish bin since the beginning of 2015. Amazing. Okay, guys, take it away.
Kia ora, can you hear me and can you see the PowerPoint?
All good.
And can you hear Liam?
Kia ora, Chris, thank you.
So yeah, I'm Hannah.
And I'm Liam.
And we're the Rubbish Trip. So since July 2017, we've been traveling New Zealand full time, giving talks and presentations to individuals, community groups, businesses, schools, all about how individuals can reduce their household waste. And our talks are based on our own research and experience. We've lived without a rubbish bin since the beginning of 2015. So our talks are, sort of usually quite holistic, cover all areas of things. Today, of course, we're just going to be focusing on food. So we have so far given over 400 talks in every region, every city, and almost every district of New Zealand to almost 20,000 people.
We've also been keeping track of the waste that we've produced in the last nearly 5.5 years because, yes, there has been some. So in that time, between the two of us, we've produced 7.6 kgs of waste that just simply had to go to landfill. We've also been keeping track of the recycling that we've produced because we do also consider this as a waste stream as well. We've produced 2 wheelie bins of paper and cardboard and 8 crates of glass, and yes, they were predominantly filled with wine bottles.
So
now you might, sorry Hannah, you might wonder how we did that. Basically, the core principle of what we apply to everything that we try to reduce our waste with is what's called the waste hierarchy, and there are many different forms, but the one we follow is called the 6 R's.
And it goes like this. The number one thing we do before anything else is we refuse what we do not need. Then we replace things that we do need that might be wasteful with a non-wasteful alternative. Whatever we cannot refuse or replace, we just reduce our consumption of. We reuse whatever we physically possibly can. Then we start to think about recycling. And after all of this, what we're left with, we should be able to rot in a home compost.
And as you can see, recycling is actually quite far down the list. So it's actually considered a last resort in some ways. And so if you're really doing zero waste food really well, then you should almost, and if you think about what are the things you normally put in your recycling bin, it is often food packaging. So if we're doing that really well, we're actually not producing much recycling to go out either, as well as waste.
So Liam and I are very food-oriented people. Some people eat to live, other people live to eat. We are in the latter category. As we said before, we traveled New Zealand on the road full-time for 3 years. Did we travel without a pantry? No, we did not. So this here is actually a mobile pantry. Looks like a suitcase, but it's full of food. Food is one of those things that brings people together. Of course, we need it to survive, but it's also breaks down boundaries. It's a beautiful way of sharing time with people to show generosity and love. Unfortunately, though, in modern society, food and waste have become intimately connected, from food scraps themselves and also the packaging. So to focus on food waste.
So yeah, so food waste itself, you know, an example of that, there's a huge amount of that, and in New Zealand alone, we throw away $872 million worth of food every year, and that's only from households, so doesn't even take into account supermarkets and restaurants and cafes. So huge amounts of waste, which is not only a shame, you know, from a social justice point of view, but it's also a massive climate change issue. Because of just the amount of wasted production, transportation, and all of those things, if food waste was a country, it would be the 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter on the planet. So it's a really enormous issue. But then also there is the issue of the stuff that you know, isn't food waste in itself, but you know, organic waste, and how we dispose of that. So that's, you know, food waste and green waste. Now, the thing is that in New Zealand, a lot of this is going to the rubbish bin. The average bin has about 30 to 50% of food and green waste. And the trouble with that is, of course, all this stuff ends up going to landfill, where it really doesn't belong, because in landfill, it breaks down in an anaerobic environment and ends up producing methane and also toxic leachate and all sorts of other problems. So it really does not belong in a rubbish bin. The solution is to take it out of the rubbish bin, set up a compost system, a worm farm, a bokashi bin. And there are also solutions for people who don't have the space, you know, people who live in central cities. There are things like sharewaste.org.nz, where people can put themselves onto a map where if they have a compost, then you can share your food waste with those people. So yeah, the key here is organic matter doesn't belong in the rubbish bin.
So people often ask us, what's the #1 thing that you would recommend people do if they want to reduce our waste? And we always say, focus on your food scraps first. People often get very fixated on plastic and packaging, but this is the biggest difference anybody can make to their waste. The other side of food and waste, though, is packaging. And, you know, we're not going to harp on here about why that's the problem. There are just so many issues with food packaging, that it leaks into the environment, that if it's paper and cardboard and it goes to landfill, it produces methane. It's an enormous amount of energy and resources for what is essentially a single-use product. It's clogging up our landfills, and it's just an enormous shame. On top of that, what's often not thought about, you know, there's a lot of talk about eating local, buying local, going for local food. But what people often don't realize is that the packaging itself can make up a large proportion of that food's overall footprint. For example, for beverages, it's often over half of the carbon footprint of the entire product is the packaging. Even brown paper bags, most of the ones you get in New Zealand have been imported from China. They're not a local product. So we encourage people to think, when they're thinking about buying local, can they also think about buying unpackaged, because that's a key part of the food conversation. So often when people find out all of this stuff, particularly about packaging, they're like, get really enthused, and they're like, yeah, okay, I'm going to give up all the things, all the packaging. It's going to be great. And then...
Hold your horses, Hannah, because, you know, often when people get into it, they actually find it way more difficult than they expected. And often this is the case because people, where they naturally tend to shop these days is the supermarket. And unfortunately, almost everything in the supermarket is packaged in some way, shape or form. And unfortunately also the unpackaged stuff, the few unpackaged things that are available in the supermarket tend to be more expensive than the packaged stuff. So there's immediately all these barriers that people come up against.
So can I go? We're not used to being in different rooms. So what's the answer? Well, we have to do a little bit of a backtrack and say, well, look, zero waste living and zero waste eating is a little bit different to what we've become used to in modern society. There are some key principles. First is that it helps if we can be flexible and adaptable. So for example, if there's something you really love to eat and it comes packaged in plastic, perhaps, what we would do is just say, oh, well, I guess we'll eat something else then. And so being a little bit flexible and adaptable to just change your diet if it's not working for you in terms of reducing waste.
The other thing is, there are certain things that we may not be able to buy because of the packaging. We can be a bit more resourceful and have a go at making things from scratch. And, there's a lot of sort of snack foods and stuff that we can do that we'll talk about in a minute.
And just generally speaking, it really helps to just go with the flow. And in that sense, eating locally, eating seasonally, these are really awesome ways of accessing food without packaging, and also having a smaller footprint overall with your food.
And the other side of that is also taking advantage of what is available in your area, because it actually does change from place to place. So you might be somewhere where you can get milk in a glass bottle swap system, or you might be somewhere where they do unpackaged tofu. So just, take advantage of what it is. When you keep your eyes open, what is available in your area, it's a really exciting thing to look for.
So one of the first ways to reduce your waste associated with food,
as we said, the supermarket is often a bit of a barrier for people. So see if you can find options outside the supermarket. And what we found is that that's often going to stores that sell things unpackaged, like bulk whole food stores, or it might also be butchers, bakeries, seafood mongers, all of these sorts of places. And if you are wondering where you find these places in your local area, we've actually produced these regional zero waste shopping guides for all regions in New Zealand. We've even put it on a map form with zero waste spot. So you can have a look for all those things and more in your local area. And we also just want to shout out to, some of those whole food bulk stores around the country are really committed to reducing waste. And Sustain Aotearoa, with the little logo down there, is a recently launched association of these zero waste stores. You actually have one of them in Thames, which is called Restore. So definitely go and support them. And again, have a look at the shopping guides to see if you can find more of these sorts of businesses which are really committed to reducing waste, both in the store and behind the scenes up the supply chain.
And Liam may have mentioned, I might have missed it, but obviously we bring our own bags and containers when we shop in these places because everything's unpackaged. And so that's one thing to remember too, is wherever you're shopping, wherever you're going, obviously we would prefer to go for local, organic fruit and vegetables. But if you're somewhere where that's not an option, but there is a supermarket, remember you can always get unpackaged fruit and veg. There's no reason to have to get fruit and veg in packets. And equally, we avoid canned food by eating seasonal foods that we can just eat fresh. And again, we get it without packaging. So thinking in this kind of way. Resourcefulness really helps as well, as I'm sure you all well know.
So there are things you can do with, things you just might otherwise treat as waste, or things you have lying around. Like you can use, in terms of food, you can use, apple cores and peels to make apple cider vinegar. You can make fermented drinks with things like feijoa skins. And another side of being resourceful is, as Yotam really went into, is gardening at home. Really having a go with that, and also being resourceful with, you might buy some veggies from the supermarket, but keeping the base of it that you can replant. This is a little bok choy that we replanted and started regrowing some leaves. So it's a really exciting thing.
The other thing we do is we forage. So it's quite hard sometimes to find tea without packaging. No problem. We just go and we forage wild herbs that we know are safe to drink. And sharing is great. Taking advantage of your local crop swap or your local food sharing stand where you can get local food without packaging. Another side of waste-free living is also, of course, just saying no to all of those things that come packaged. And this tends to be branded food. It tends to be food that isn't good for us anyway. So we just refuse all of that stuff, and we just make these things from scratch ourselves with the unpackaged ingredients that we've sourced from those ways that we mentioned before. And if you're interested in finding out any of our easy recipes, they're all on our website already. So one of the things that we hear time and time again is, I would love to live like this, but it's too time consuming, it's too expensive, I don't know how. And this is sounds like a sacrifice because I have to give up all of these things I know and love. Well, the first thing to say is we actually aren't really cooks, but turns out that we can make things from scratch, and they haven't been horrendous or disgusting. In fact, even Miriama Kamo loves our dips and said, I lose any sense of proprietary around your green pesto dip, pea flour crackers, and delicious bliss balls. So it's not all depressing.
There's also, you know, all sorts of positive spin-offs from this lifestyle we've noticed. Like, it was actually much easier than we expected it was going to be. We also found that we were saving a lot of money living and shopping this way. And sorry, Hannah, you go.
The other thing too is that we've developed resilience and resourcefulness and independence from so many corporations. We basically never shop in supermarkets. We are pretty much immune to advertising and branding because it's irrelevant to us because we don't buy things in packets, and we also don't have to engage with our curbside waste and recycling system, which is just frankly a mess. So all of these things are quite liberating. And
we've also found that, you know, we've actually really improved our diets in this way because we're not buying those prepackaged, pre-made foods that have additives, that have added sugar and salt and all these things that can be quite unhealthy. And so it's really just been a wonderful transition for us in so many different ways that, you know, it's not just about waste, but it was really about well-being in so many different aspects of life.
So we're just going to wrap up by saying that you may or may not have heard of Pipirikia Papatuanuku. This is June for the planet, and it is an awesome initiative run by a couple in Waikato, and it's about taking actions throughout the month of June to look after the planet Earth and ourselves. And this year, this June, there's a whole bunch of actions that are food related. So really recommend you go sign up. Homegrown campaign to be conscious about what we do with our food. So thank you very much for listening to us. It was a pleasure to be able to speak to you, and thank you to Chris and Thomas and Catherine and everyone else who's been involved in organising, and thank you to the co-panelists. It's lovely to be here with you. We look forward to your questions.
Hi, kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liam and Hannah. That first priority on your list, refuse, that's the one that I find the challenging one right there. So let's move on. Question and answer session time. Catherine. Catherine, are you there?
So there was the first question came through was, it just said to all food speakers, at the moment, and in particular as the tourist trade is virtually erased, agriculture will become essential to stabilise our economy with exports. How can we produce food for export sustainability? Does anyone feel they'd like to comment on that one? Any of our speakers?
Who wants to start?
Go on, Jenna.
Well, you know, in 2017, sorry, I'm just pulling this statistic out of my head. $17 billion of exports with dairy and meat, and so yeah, it's already a big part of our economy, and we just need to make sure that we can get premium prices for it, and we need to support our farmers to become to use less chemicals, as Yotam said, because that's what the premium price is demanding, is grass-fed, hormone-free protein. So that's what I would say.
I would just say on top of, I would say that I would see this as an opportunity to actually reduce the amount of food that we export, but make sure that we supply New Zealanders with all the food they need to go and buy New Zealanders. And I think the large amounts of meat and dairy that we export, we put a lot of pressure on New Zealand's environment and farmers, and we can be a lot more sustainable. So I would prefer us to go to a different direction. I think this is a great opportunity.
It's much
that's the same before.
Much better connection, Yotam.
Yeah, I've improved my microphone. I think my computer's microphone was bad, so I've got this one.
And I also jump in and say, like, talking about export is interesting. From me and Liam's perspective, we eat a vegan diet and we try really hard to eat only locally grown food. And one thing we've really noticed is the lack of plant-based protein that's grown in New Zealand. So to not be dependent on imports of food would be really great. So thinking about that balance as well, we'd love to see more conversion away from meat and dairy for export towards locally grown plant-based proteins for New Zealanders. Yeah, that would be great.
There are farmers that are beginning to recognise that. There's a farmer in Taranaki that grows quinoa and beef, and there's also one in a Wairarapa who grows cricket protein and beef protein. So they're diversifying their protein offerings. But yeah, it needs to be farmed a lot more cleaner. And as Yotam said, and I said before, we need to supply our own needs and be self-sufficient and reliable before we start, while we're working on cleaning up our act for overseas as well.
Thank you. Liam, did you want to respond to that question? Or?
No, I was just basically going to say what Joe just said, that that there is diversification already happening. Yeah, and one example I was going to give was Cannock Farms in Rangitake district, who are also still doing some dairy but converting to growing organic pumpkin seeds for the local market. So yeah, there's some wonderful things happening.
Sounds like it. Okay, Yotam, we have a question here for you. Do you see farmers on the Coromandel showing interest in adopting regenerative farming practices?
Yes, definitely. And I'm being approached by about a dozen Coromandel farmers every year that they want to learn how to feed their communities better. So you will see, if you already haven't noticed, there are small-scale farmers next to you that are providing organically grown food. And there's also a very large amount of farmers that don't want to make a change, that are happy to do things as they are. We've got already complicated systems, or we've got the system set, and it's not easy for them to change it. And that's where I think if their practices are harmful for their environment, then they should be restricted and banned, or even as I mentioned, they will need to pay for the pollution that they're causing, and hand in hand with that, there must be an organized government-led transition to help them to move to sustainable practices. So I think if there would be more information out there, more organizations offering services to help farmers move to regenerative farming practices, that would encourage that movement to grow a lot faster than it would otherwise do. Waivers need to be incentive, so making it harder to pollute, make polluters pay, and helping farmers to create better growing systems. I think there's a lot of people in the Coromandel that would answer that call.
Well spoken. Exciting stuff. Now I'm just checking into chat. Joanna, I think this might be a local question from a local person. Can you comment on the potential for schools, like Mercury Bay Area School, to adopt horticulture on campus, to supply the school canteen, and for the students to be involved in running that canteen?
Okay, so that's something that I've brought with me into teaching. And in fact, it's one of the reasons I got into teaching. A friend of mine, Shane Nartai, has brought horticulture into Road Street School in Frankton, and if you guys look up him, he's brought on horticulture into his Decile 1 primary school. Initially it was just each classroom had a garden, and now they and then he quickly realised that they needed a kitchen to process the food, because a lot of people didn't know how to use it. And then then he decided, we're trying to teach healthy food practices, and we're making the kids eat outside in the cold on the concrete. So they built a covered area for everyone to eat in. And then they've used that to teach business as well. So the kids were saving up all their blueberries and freezing them so that they could sell them and buy a ice cream machine, one of those real fruit ice cream machines, and then they were renting that out. So he's a real inspiration, and I would like to achieve that in our school. Currently, I'm looking at a mobile, food truck so that we can sell produce and food that we've made with our produce from that. So it's in the works, but like most of these things, it takes time. And I might have got it completed by the time I retire. Slowly.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Now, our question for Hannah and Liam. What do we need to do to get major supermarket chains to adopt truly 100% recyclable packaging? And what might that look like?
Great question. Could I just start, Liam? Is it okay?
Yeah, go.
Remember the waste hierarchy, the 6 R's that we put up? So actually recycling is quite low down the waste hierarchy. So we probably need to, because we don't have much time left to sort out these multiple crises for our environment, if we're going to put our energy somewhere, we might as well go, shoot for the moon. So we are thinking about how do we actually move our packaging system towards reusables. So unpackaged, so people can bring their own containers, or scalable reuse systems. So we're seeing some of these things being picked up overseas. TerraCycle have started this company called Loop, which is doing reusable packaging for major brands in the US and in France now. So looking at those kinds of things, and just normalizing the use of refill stations and reusables. It's definitely feasible. For example, you can have vending machine milk, milk from vending machines where people bring their own bottles. So thinking about going back to reusable, refillable beverages, glass bottles like we had back in the day. So instead of thinking recycling, thinking reusing. And in terms of 100% recyclable, if we really want to achieve that, we need to be looking away from plastic, because it's not recyclable, it's only downcyclable. And because glass is heavier and can have a higher carbon footprint, it's debatable, but it still has an impact. We want to think about using it as a reusable rather than recyclable. Liam?
Yeah, I think just to add to and talk about the how do we get major supermarket chains to make some of these changes. I think it's actually really important that we support the small scale local businesses who are actually pioneering these new systems. Like we mentioned, the zero waste stores like Restore here in Thames, because the more that they have support and are able to explore these different systems, then they can prove the model that then say supermarkets can take up further down the track. And also, but the thing with supporting these small scale local stores is they themselves are also interested in and incentivized to support local producers, because it's much easier to to have reusable packaging when it's just a very short supply chain. Doing a swap system with the containers, with the bulk containers, and a lot of them are already doing that. So I think as individuals, we do have, I think, a responsibility to support businesses like that, so that can sort of feed into and influence some of those bigger chains.
Good, thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. A question here, it says, like Hannah, I am concerned with the quantity of food scraps that could or should be composted instead of thrown into landfill. Can we push councils or DOC or eyesites to insist on bokashi bins and self-contained vans or in Airbnb places and camping grounds, etc.? What do you think, Hannah and Liam?
Well, firstly, want to acknowledge that DOC up in the Coromandel Peninsula actually did go pack in, pack out last summer, and then to do that, they had to install lots of composting and worm farm systems at the campsites. So DOC's doing some great stuff in that area in terms of dealing with food scraps in sensitive areas. People often say, oh, but it attracts pests. It's like, well, they're working it out in these areas. So that's good to look at. Liam, do you want to add something else?
I think there's a few interesting models around the country of sort of decentralized community scale composting hubs where people can, just it's a place where people can bring their food scraps to a compost, and it's managed by someone. And in fact, those are often connected with urban farms, so that compost is actually put to a really good use as well. So expanding and scaling that sort of system out around the country and all sorts of different areas could be a really good thing. But in the meantime, there is, as I mentioned earlier, that resource sharewaste.org.nz that connects people up with a compost with people who need somewhere to put their food scraps.
Remembering that food scraps are actually a resource, they're not a waste. They help us to grow food. So perhaps if we were focusing more on growing food locally in regenerative ways, we may have more of an incentive not to put that resource into the rubbish bin. So it's a sign of a bigger systemic problem.
It's a very good point. And my hens would agree with you 100% that food scraps are not waste. With your 6 R's that you were looking at before, the question here is, your 6 R's are really asking for a total change in the way we live. We're discouraged here in TCDC district with new recycling that'll only take number 1 and number 2, and they won't take any milk bottle tops at all. Have you seen this? Is this the case anywhere else in Aotearoa?
It's becoming more and more of the case, and that's not because your council's incompetent. It's because plastics 3 to 7 are extremely difficult to recycle, and we're living in never never land when we do that. 5 may eventually be able to recycled in New Zealand, but this is where we need government policy to come in and actually create product stewardship around packaging to say you cannot use these materials anymore, or if you're going to use them, you have to pay to recycle them. Like, the costs need to be put on the businesses and the producers, not on councils and ratepayers, because it's inefficient doing it that way. So yeah, it is happening around the country, and we actually support it because it's sending that message up to government that these things need to change. But also in Thames, as you know, you've got the Seagull Centre that's doing amazing things. So we also have to remember that these conversations go beyond packaging too. There's so much stuff in our economy that we waste. So thinking about the wonderful things too that are going on in TCDC.
It's a very good point. I agree with you. Okay, one here, we've really got people fired up about recycling and things. Somebody asking how, Jess is wanting to know, have anyone got any tips for reducing waste with regards to feeding pets? Any thoughts at all from anyone about that one?
Yeah, often, local butchers will have sort of offcuts and things like that are for pets. So go into a local butcher and see if they've got anything.
Liam's dad used to make the dog food himself.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, dogs can eat a very similar diet to humans. So yeah, you can make your own food from scratch as well for your pets.
Yeah, I'm looking at growing black soldier fly larvae to feed the ducks. I've got as far as experimenting, and the ducks really like them, so just going to work out how to do it on a slightly bigger scale.
Wonderful, thank you, Lou. Another question there. Recycling seeds of fruit and vegetables, like avocado and pumpkin seeds. I'm assuming that's opposed to using those seeds to grow more plants. Did the person who put that in the chat wish to ask more on that, or is it just how do you recycle seeds of fruits and vegetables like avocado? Ah, there it goes. I mean, how do I compost it? Thank you. So how best to compost things like avocado seeds? Does anyone have any clues?
So Tam, what do you do?
With our avocado chips, first of all, we put them with a regular compost bins, and it might take them more than one cycle, but eventually they do decompose. If you have a very large amount and it doesn't work in your composting systems, you can actually just put them into your landscape You can put them around your existing fruit trees, and they're quite good fibrous material, and they will break over time. Pumpkin seeds, you just need to make sure, like many compost bins are better off to be sealed from rats, and because they will go to nutritious things like that. But if you've got either a good compost bin or a hot compost bin going on, there shouldn't be any problem to recycle, to compost pumpkin seeds.
Good, thank you. A question from Thomas, actually. Packaging materials for recycling. This is for Hannah and Liam. What materials do you use for your reusable packaging of food?
What do we use?
Mm.
We just use what we already had from before. So glass jars that we already have, we keep. We have had a few Snaplock plastic bags from the before times that we still use. They're 5 years old, we wash them out. If we do get brown paper bags ever, we will reuse them till they fall apart before composting them. We use wine bottles for our liquids on tap. Yeah, we just make do. If we have fabric offcuts, we sew them into reusable bags. Yeah. We haven't bought any reusable bags or containers. We're much too budget for that.
How do you store your food at home?
Glass jars.
Glass jars.
Thank you.
We buy all of our food in bulk, and we store our food in buckets. I'll buy 25 kilo bag of rice or a 10 kilo of peanut butter, and we'll just use those containers again and again.
Thank you. Okay, now I see it is only 2 minutes left from our agenda. There is a comment from Susa I'll just read out. As I see it, the biggest challenge is initiating, fostering, sparking behaviour change among the masses. How do we, as people who are interested in this subject, inspire our population, the people, to wake up and implement change from within?
Pressure the government. As Yotam said, we need government-led systemic change, and something like Ministry of Food could start this radical changes that we need. Something like building off this momentum of the virus and lockdown. It's awakened people up a little bit and illustrated that, you know, we're not that resilient. Now's the time that we can make those changes, but we have to move past, you know, excuse me, but reusing our jars. We have to actually get up there and get in with make some big radical changes. As Yotam said when he started, it's broken and we don't have that much time left. So people need to pressure their governments and their government and yeah, I'm sure everyone can add to that.
Can I just actually say that we absolutely agree and support that we need that radical change from the top, but we also believe that that change really won't be possible unless everyone at every level is working towards that. And so we talk a lot about the need for individual change, but we see that within the systemic radical change that we do need, and that we kind of need that from a grassroots level, yes, to push the government and to influence business, so that there are all these feedback loops going on, so that we can all move towards the kind of radical vision of the future that we need. So absolutely. And I think it kind of goes back to if people are only working on top level policy change, it can be quite disempowering, because people spend decades trying to lobby for something to happen and it doesn't happen, or the government changes and then things go in a completely different direction. And so I think there's an element of empowerment that comes from being able to change what you have control of, but not stopping there, and actually seeing that as part of the bigger picture of achieving systemic change.
Yeah, I agree, Larry. Well said.
Yes,
Exactly. Maybe if I can say a couple of words. So thank you very much for coming. My idea for this event was exactly what has happened, that we talk about local solutions that we individually can do. What can we do now? And what Liam just said is so true, that we can wait forever for the government to do something that we lobby for, while we have it totally in our power tomorrow to shop only those things that avoid what we can avoid in form of rubbish, for example, and by our shopping choices, promote those farmers like Yotam who produce those products for us in a sustainable way. We can make, if 5 million people would tomorrow make a choice, the government would work the day after, just like they did with COVID. We could make overnight, turn all the supermarkets into wondering why nobody buys the yogurt in plastic containers anymore. And believe me, a week later, they would be changing entirely their habits, because they'll be out of business if they don't. And just like this virus turned the entire tourism industry off in one big flat, we together, the 5 million people of us, can change everything overnight. And I think very few people actually get that idea that we have that power.
yes, thank you. Well spoken. Now, guys, it is past the end of our question time, but John Donald has been waving furiously at us for quite some time. John, is there something you wished to say?
It was just an evil thought that I had, and that was if you bought stuff from the supermarket and it was wrapped in plastic, you should take the plastic back to the supermarket and give it back to the supermarket.
Yes, I've seen that done. I saw someone that they bought a washing machine and with all the packaging, and they said, I don't want the packaging, I want the washing machine. And they took the box and the plastic and everything back and dumped it on the counter.
Yeah, nice.
Okay, so thank you.
Have we got more questions there?
I just wanted to answer John's proposal. They tried that in Germany, and what happened was, instead of encouraging the supermarkets to change their behaviour, because actually it's the manufacturers, not the supermarkets, who are the issue with the packaging, the supermarkets just started their own rubbish collection and took it to landfill a different way.
And years ago, we used to, when they phased out glass milk bottles, we used to post the plastic milk bottles back to the manufacturers and take big deliveries and dump them at the manufacturer. But of course, it didn't achieve anything much.
Yeah. So the issue is really, it's back to what everybody's been saying today. We've got to get the packaging industry and the manufacturers of everything. If you need to buy stuff, and for some people it's going to be possibly a lot harder to start growing their own food because they need some education. You know, there's a lot of other systems that we need to put in place, but the packaging industry is definitely something that we need to be looking at.
Yes, and I'm very sure that everyone on this call is doing that as well. So keep doing it, keep spreading the word. So, Chris, can we get back to you for the...
Okay, so the next thing on our agenda was to ask our panelists if they would like to give a little bit of a summation to us of the conversation and, ways forward, things that they want to leave us with, really. So starting with Yotam.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Catherine. I think we are in a very, very severe situation with climate disruption. We have very, very short amount of time to act, to actually ensure our survival and to stop the crazy destruction that we're doing. So I think we need to act like it's an emergency, and we need to find radical solutions and alternatives to the current system. And so I think every one of us should be doing what we can, and in terms of looking at the food, eating for the planet, like this is definitely it's a part of a larger problem. It's not just with food, and I would like to see people growing more of their own food. I'd like to see people finding local producers and supporting them, I would say religiously, because once a crisis comes, you can't expect to just have, I can just go and rely on that small-scale farmer over there. We need to build that network. We need to build that resilience today so we can have it within a few years. And I think we have to have, I think it's too slow for farmers to work the way we have and build our skill and to farm this way. I think we just need to have a lot more farmers, and we need to have that fast, and we need to stop the pollution that's happening in the food industry and the poisoning of the earth and the water and the soil. And I would love to see from the Green Party support for regenerative farmers. I would like to see generally more support for farmers to transition to organics. Farmers need everybody's help to do this. Farmers can't do this on their own. So it's from consumers and also from politicians. And I'd like also to see policies from the Green Party that will help reform the food system for anyone's benefit, because it's broken, but we can fix it. Those solutions are here. Just need to act on them on a personal level, on a community level, and on the governmental level. That's the only way we can make it happen, and we're very short of time.
Thanks. Joanna.
Yep. Oh, sorry if I'm repeating, but yeah, definitely personal, local, and government level. We need to act, but you know, maybe on a local level, we can do what Dunedin and Wellington has done, and have a dedicated community food resilience position who can coordinate community gardens and coordinate local composting hubs so that they can feed into our community gardens. So at least we're resilient in this area, and while we're working on resilience, that's all I want to say.
Okay. Liam and Hannah.
Yeah, totally support what both Joe and Yotam have said, and the need for action at all levels. And you know, and I think we need to see a lot of these multiple issues that we face as interconnected as well. And I think there is a risk that, you know, in order to solve one issue, we might end up exacerbating other issues, and so we really need to have a combined approach to a lot of these things. I'll just sort of leave that as a general comment.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with everything that everybody's said, and also for Liam and I, when we talk about waste, you know, often people focus on waste as the problem in and of itself, but waste is just a symptom of wider systemic issues, in that our economy is resource and energy inefficient. And so we do need to be thinking, and as Liam said, in that interconnected, bigger picture way. And that example of the food waste is a really good example. We only think of it as waste because we're not resilient and we aren't growing our own food locally. And yeah, that was the last thing I wanted to reinforce, is that the answer to a lot of these problems is to try and eat local food. That's, you know, it reduces waste, it reduces carbon emissions, it supports local business, it supports people doing the right thing in New Zealand, and also it creates a market for, if you're buying local, organic, regenerative food, it creates a market for that. So, so yeah, and thanks again for having us.
Thank you all so much for your presentations and for your inspiration, really. So, Anna, you want to speak?
Okay, I'm the advertisement. I'm the one who says, join us. Whoops, join the Greens. I love what everyone's been saying. Do you know that in the 70s, the Ministry of Agriculture at that time actually had a whole plan for New Zealand to go organic. But then we came under the influence of, you know, the oil economy, and that was chucked out. But just imagine what our country would have been if we'd done that. It would have been a very different place. We would have been leading the world and giving leadership in ways that we needed. Now we are, I agree with all of you, totally in crisis. We've got climate crisis, crisis of inequality, crisis in biodiversity, and everything that you've all talked about today actually is reducing those big issues down to that basic thing that we need as human beings, and that's food. We didn't get round to talking about water, but none of everything that you're all talking about mentioned water, so we might have to do that another day. But that is another huge crisis which we're already experiencing. So I've just absolutely loved the conversation, and it's vital, and kia ora to everyone for the mahi you are doing and the leadership you are doing. Change is a difficult thing to achieve. It's something that happens little by little, and it's very frustrating. But every now and then, when everything lines up in the right way, you can get really big change happening. And the COVID crisis actually has brought us to a point where we could have big change. However, at the moment, there's a lot of the resources that should and could be going into dealing with the big issues of feeding the planet, of climate and so forth, are going to be diverted into same old, same old. And this is where I'm going to appeal to you all to become political activists as well as food activists and waste activists, which are absolutely vital. But many of you have talked about getting the government to do this and to do that. Well, the government is us. We are our own government. This is what civil society is. And so the way we can actually get our government doing what we think is important is to vote. It's surprising how many people don't vote, how many people we know who don't vote. So my request to you all is to get involved with the elections. They're just 3 months away. We've already got everyone lining up, the old school and the potential new way. The Greens are the only party where every member can actually be involved in making the policy. So if you really want regenerative farming, to deal with the waste cycle, to get us to a circular economy, join the party and make the policy that we need. It's critical. Go to our website, www.greens.org, and you will be able to explore the policy as it exists. Much of it you'll be happy with, I'm sure. There's always room for improvement and change. However, it isn't going to make an iota of difference if the Greens are not well represented in Parliament. At the moment, we have a lot of the ideals that have been expressed by all of you tonight so eloquently and with such urgency, which is required. But we can get those changes in if we get the party vote to give us the numbers. I'd really ask you to go back and look at what the Greens have achieved with only 80 MPs. It's been huge. The work, for example, in the environment on waste, water, climate change, we finally got a Zero Climate Act through, have been achieved by 8 MPs, 8 out of 120. Now imagine if we could double that number, but there's only one way to do that. It might be that you really like candidates and this and that, and you might think other agendas have a lot going for it. But I think everyone attending here tonight actually realizes that we're in a bigger picture crisis. So I would argue for you all to get involved, talk with your friends, talk with your families, talk with, like our local butcher when I take my container and he puts a bit of nice meat in it. Talk with everyone you see. You've got 3 months. Become a campaigner. Be the change. We can be the government that makes the change we need. So I urge you to join us. After this, we're going to take the liberty of sending an email to your addresses that we have with a few places you can go to check out our ideas. We also have a Coromandel Greens Facebook, and all of our ministers have Facebook. So I've just been browsing it. Eugenie Sage is one, she's Minister of Environment and Conservation, doing astonishing work. Have a look at what we're offering. Become campaigners, go out and work and be part of the change. It's a really critical year this year. We know, like we're up to 480 parts per million now of carbon. When we first started on some of these programs, it was only 10, 12 years ago, we were all on 350.org. Now we're 418 parts per million. We're at the tipping point. So please help us. We want to help you. We're all part of it. It's our world. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anna, for those stirring and galvanizing words. Fantastic. Okay, so people, we're coming to the close, and I would just like to thank all our participants that have turned up to make this meeting a success. Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about local, and this is our local strength. This is keeping these conversations going. So, final karakia. Liam, would you like to lead us?
Ai, kia ora koutou. Thank you so much for all your words. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te aiao, te aroha, me te marutou, tihei mauri ora. May peace, love and safety be upon us all. Tihei mauri ora.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Go well, everyone. Haere rā, hoki mai.
Mā